Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our regular Friday webinar with Constructing Excellence and the Structural Timber Association. We're just going to give our delegates the time to come in. We are expecting 40 or 50 people today, so we've opened the doors and we're going to welcome you in. I hope day 2 of lockdown is going well for you. I don't know whether, like me, you're waiting on tenterhooks to see the inevitable across the pond in the United States. But I think we're going to be in for a new president in the United States anytime soon, and I'm sure we're all waiting eagerly for that. So lots going on, and today we're going to be talking about that all-important topic of communication. But as I say, we're going to just leave it a few more minutes, if you don't mind, or a few more seconds, if you don't mind. We've got the doors open, so to speak, and we're just welcoming people into the room. We're just over halfway there, I think, at the moment. Hope you're well. I don't know what the weather's like where you are, but here in Somerset, where I am, the sun is shining. And I think certainly after today's webinar, I'm going to go and take advantage of the sunshine with a walk. So where are we? 12:02. I think we'll make a start, and then others can join us because you good people have got in at the opening time. So what I'd like you to do, maybe first of all, ladies and gents, maybe in the chat box, if you could just mention your name, where you're from, which company, and geographically where you're from. We'll do a bit of a shout out session later on. So in the chat box, just your name, your company, and where you're from in the UK. That would be good. And as we go through the presentation, again, using the Zoom facility that we're all so familiar with now, if you could just use the Q&A box as we go through, and then we can ask those questions of Steve at the end of his presentation. So without further ado, I'm delighted today to welcome Steve Hayes. He's going to be talking about communication, which of course at the moment, particularly during lockdown again, is so very important, but is anyway. We've been having a good old chinwag before we came on air, so to speak, because we both have a passion for amateur musical theatre. And we were both saying how disappointed we were this year that we haven't been able to do the productions that we would normally do. I've missed out on playing Harold Wilson, for example, in Made in Dagenham. So, you know, what could be worse than that, you might say. So we have something in common. But the reason I mention that is because actually communication is key to what we do as a hobby. And I just wonder whether that might filter through into some of the things that Steve's got to say. So we do produce these Friday 12 o'clock webinars each week. It's bringing together the Structural Timber Association, of which I'm the Chief Executive, plus CE Southwest, CE Midlands, CE Wales and CE Northwest together now with CE National. So we're a growing band of organisations that are coming together every week to bring you what we hope is a useful hour's webinar. So without further ado, on the subject of communication, it is my pleasure, ladies and gentlemen, to introduce Steve Hayes. Over to you, Steve. Look forward to what you have to say. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew, and good afternoon, everyone. It's great to see so many people ticking through here in the participants box, and I'm really pleased to have the opportunity to speak to you all today. I'm aware that there's a real variety of people from different organisations, different sectors on the call. What I've tried to do today is to make this as kind of as general, I guess, as possible. So I hope that what will happen is you can come away with some lessons, some practical tips that you can perhaps take back to your own organisation and do some thinking around this incredibly important aspect of our work, which is, of course, communications. Particularly important at the moment, I would say, given some of the challenges that we're facing. So I have a presentation which I'm going to talk through. I'm going to leave plenty of time at the end for questions, so please do keep your questions coming through. I think there's a Q&A facility. You can ask a question at any time and we'll move on to those at the end. So I'm going to share my screen now. Hopefully the technology should hold up for us. I'm hoping that you can see that. And I've called the presentation today Great Communication and Why It Matters. So first of all, just a bit of context about my organisation. As Andrew introduced me, I'm the head of communications at Citizen, and Citizen is a social housing provider. We have about 30,000 homes across the West Midlands. We have about 1,000 staff, nearer to 1,100 now, in fact, in a really diverse spread of roles, from office workers to maintenance guys who go out and do repairs in our properties, and a whole host of other roles in between. We as an organisation have recently been through a pretty major transformation. So over the last couple of years, we have rebranded and amalgamated what was a fairly complex group structure. You may have heard of WM Housing. I won't be offended if you haven't, because that was part of the reason why we rebranded. Or some of our subgroups from previous incarnations were West Mercia Homes, Whitefriars, and we brought all of those together under the Citizen umbrella. So it's been a busy time for us. And in terms of our construction plans, well, we have our most ambitious set of construction plans for the next, from 2019 to 2023. We've got a commitment to build 2,600 homes, which is quite a big ramping up of our own development programme. So I wanted to talk about, and as I said at the start, I know that there are a variety of different professions and roles in the group today. So I'm going to try and keep this as general as possible and spark some thoughts and debate. But I guess from a housing and construction angle, but for many organisations, what we benefit from is a clear purpose. Everyone will have their own version of that. All of you will in your own organisations, but particularly from the point of view of my own and from construction colleagues, what we do actually has quite a clear social purpose to it. So, you know, there are a few more important things at the moment than building homes for people who really need them. And our work is very much people-centered. It's not really about buildings. It's about people and their lives. And we make a difference, a really important difference, given the context of the world that we currently live in and the housing challenges that exist. And I guess, you know, why it matters. Why does it matter that we communicate well? And I'm quite passionate about this. I've done a few similar sessions to this. And I do feel sometimes we need to make the case for good communication, because there is a danger that it becomes seen as a bit of a kind of fluffy add-on to business as usual, when in fact it's quite the opposite. And I'm going to talk a bit more about that as we go through today. But, you know, good communication matters quite simply because whoever our customers are, we have a duty to them. We all have customers. They might be different, but we all have a duty to them to communicate with them well. And it's something we need to do if we're going to be successful as organizations. You know, for us, we have a responsibility to grow and help more people in our communities. And frankly, the way that we convey messages to our audiences, all of those audiences, be they external or internal, sits at the heart of successful work of any organization. So communication really is crucially important. The challenge from a staff point of view, and I am going to talk about this quite a lot today because I think it's an area of communication which is undervalued hugely. And again, you all have organizations, you all have however many staff, small or big. This is a really, really important area. Potentially, I would argue, the most important area of all, and I'm going to explain why. You have to invest in the way that you engage and speak to your own teams. You have to create a clear narrative and share updates within that, and you have to inform, engage, inspire, and motivate your colleagues. Perhaps one of the most challenging things that you can do, if at the moment, like my organisation, a large proportion of your staff, obviously not based in offices, and they're working from home at the moment. So I'm going to start today with a quote, which is a really good quote from George Bernard Shaw, and I use this quite a lot. And he said once that the single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place. And it's worth just thinking about that for a moment and thinking about your own organizations and when that may have happened. There are a lot of assumptions that messages that need to get to staff or to customers or whoever are just going to land there via osmosis. Well, people know that, you know, they know that that's, you know, actually, let's challenge ourselves all the time to make sure that this doesn't happen. And I'm going to just kind of talk to start with about a structure that I think we all need to challenge. And again, in your organizations, you'll have different forms of this. I imagine that for some of you, in perhaps construction or kind of private businesses, there would be a very, very significant marketing element to most of your communication work. For us, it's slightly different. We do have some marketing that we have to do, but most of our properties, of course, are assigned through local authorities via housing waiting lists. So we have a slightly different challenge. But whatever the balance of your own communication is, there's a point here, which is that all communication is best done when it's focused on the content. So here we are with this roundel here, which kind of gives you an indication of some of these disciplines. Really important that they are separate disciplines because they involve unique skills in their own right. But what we need to make sure we do is have a system whereby all of this is just content that we deal with, and across these disciplines that content is shared. But please don't pigeonhole these functions and have colleagues that don't communicate with each other. It's the worst thing that you can do. And it strikes right through to even recruitment. Is how do we bring in people that can do all of these things, or certainly work across all of these things, is a question that we need to ask ourselves increasingly, I think, because the best communication work is collaborative. There's no doubt about that, especially in sectors like ours. But I can't stress enough, it is all about the content. Whether you're doing marketing, whether you're doing internal communications, whatever audience you are trying to hit. And again, just to sort of expand upon that point here, is this is a much better way of envisaging this. Is the external work and the internal work that we do are fundamentally joined at the core by the content. And it's really about how we use that content and shape it for different purposes. Again, hammering home the same point, really, the discipline in all communication is to remember the most important thing is the content. And a really important point here is don't fixate on getting a task done. That has been a traditional thing in communications that I've seen over the years. It's a feeling that we have people that work with us who have a task, and once they've done that task, they can tick it off their list and jobs are good. We can't have that focus. We need to think about things in a slightly different way. And I'm gonna use an example here, which is kind of housing construction focused, but the development press release, which some of you on the call may be familiar with, or your colleagues certainly will be. And it's a fairly simple process, isn't it? We at Citizen, I have colleagues that do this in my team, who keep on top of, we work with our development colleagues to keep on top of all of the key kind of landmarks that any development goes through and do the PR around them. And here's how that task would traditionally be approached. Your PR officer writes the press release, sends it out to the local papers, puts it on the website, and probably tweets about it once. And then they tick that off their list and that job's done. Well, actually, no, the job isn't done. We need to take a different approach. As an example, let's challenge ourselves to think, what could we do with that before we kiss it goodbye, put the photos in an archive in a folder somewhere and say that's a piece of work that we've done? Could we talk to the family or one of the families who got one of those homes, write up their story? Yes, we should, because you'll use that again and again. Keep that as a bank of a case study that shows from the point of view of someone who has benefited from your services, how good they were and what impact that's had on their lives. Again, something that we're uniquely able to do in the construction and kind of housing sectors, really. But think about how you could use a quote from that story in marketing, how you can use it in your annual reports, how you might use it to engage stakeholders. Think about how you might make that story appeal to your colleagues. And this is a really key thing that I often see in communication, is you have a team that's dedicated to making sure that people outside of your organization are looking at and appreciating the work that you do, but not thinking about how that can be an engaging tool for your colleagues. And that goes back to that point that there's an assumption that somehow is reaching your colleagues in your finance teams or your HR teams or IT teams by osmosis, when actually it probably isn't. And that's fundamental in terms of engaging people about the work that you do and your vision and your mission. So please do think about how you can turn stories that you are working on into something that can engage your colleagues. And I would say that anything you are doing which might have an external focus, you can somehow engage your colleagues with. So that's the challenge there. And put a different spin on it. Speak to the team that made it happen. Obviously, you don't want to just put a development press release on your intranet if you've got one, or whatever version it is, or your internal newsletters. But you could speak to the team. You could take a different stance with it. You could look at the opportunities to tell that story in a slightly different way, which gets across your vision and the work that you do. And I would say this, in all communications work, please don't be afraid to invest in good photography. In fact, quite the opposite. Go to the other end of the extreme and take every opportunity to get good photographs, because it's not expensive to do and you will use them over and over again. And they make an absolutely massive difference today in terms of, they always have done. Even the earliest advertising, great images were crucial to it. So please do invest in that. You're talking about, you know, for us, for example, for that, using that development press release as an example, that photo opportunity, £150 to get a professional photographer there for an hour and a half. You'll use those photos over and over again. And think about the photos that you want to get before you get the photographer to go. So not just the posed up PR shot, but maybe some really nice resident shots that you can use alongside your case studies and in your marketing. It's that sort of thinking that can get you the most value out of all of this. But the key is, tell this story again and again. Don't think that once it's done, that's your opportunity gone. You know, with each development that we do, we schedule in a really simple thing, but we schedule in a program of tweets, all saying something slightly different about that particular development for a period of months. And no one is looking at that and going, well, they were tweeting about that 3 months ago, because they've either seen it and they flick past it, or they kind of go, well, that's a great piece of work that's been done there, and they engage with it. And those posts that are being done months later are engaged with just as much as the first one. So don't think people have heard it and seen it. They probably haven't. Again, thinking about how you could use this content, well, you can do a website case study rather than just have a section on our website that talks about us building homes. Suddenly now we have a great story here from a lady called Christy, which we got when we did a development press release. We got talking to her over the phone when we were arranging the photo opportunity. A member of my team discovered that actually she had been living with her young son in the photo here in temporary accommodation in B&Bs for 6 months before she got a home with us. Well, that's a much more interesting story, frankly, to most people than we've just built a house, you know. So it's thinking like that and doing that groundwork. And that was a 20-minute phone conversation. This isn't complicated stuff. And again, that's invaluable content, because we've used that in our annual reports, again, to tell a story and engage people about the work we've done over the course of the year. We then have done pieces like this. For example, we did a press release, of course, when we did some trade media stuff around a massive regeneration project that we will be doing in Coventry. But we also then took a slightly different approach with that and used it as an internal feature for our colleagues, which was an interview with our director of regeneration about the significance of that from the point of view of citizen, rather than the messaging that we would have put out to residents and to the local media about the investment that we were putting in the area. Just a slightly different way of using that content and reinvigorating it for a different audience. And then, of course, you know, think about every opportunity you've got. If you've gathered the content for a development press release, for example, you've also got the content there for a development of the week feature in Inside Housing, as an example, or whatever your trade magazines are, you know. And what we do is we do the work for the journalists, because they're very busy, they're very stretched. So when we send these over, we send it as it appears in the magazine. We don't send them a copy of the press release and expect them to do the work. You're going to get a much better chance of getting that in if you're the one who sends it in the format that then they're just copying and pasting it. So it's the little simple things like that can get you a long way. Why waste the opportunity to get that? Think about, is it video worthy? And this is a really important thing in the modern world, obviously. God, that makes me sound very, very old, modern world. But today, video is a really important way of engaging people, and short videos, interactive videos, not 10-minute ones. We had some real success with a modular pilot that we did in Coventry on the site of some old garage sites, which had been derelict and which would become an eyesore. And actually, we put 2 fantastic modular homes on them. And we did some brilliant work with a company called Totally Modular, who we worked with on that, where we did a time-lapse video, which kind of tracked this from the building of the homes in the factory, them being delivered to the site. And actually, that can then be a hook for some great media coverage. So this ended up on Midlands Today, prime time coverage for us. When actually, you know, I accept modular isn't a new thing, but we were able to tell a story about how we were approaching that in the Midlands, and that appealed to them as a story that they could use as a hook to tell a bigger story about modular and its development in our communities. But do think about video. Again, not cheap, but not expensive for the value that you get from it. And of course, you think about this, you've gathered all this content. What you've got actually is the basis of a really good award entry, probably. I mean, not all developments are going to be award worthy, but using the modular example, we'd done so much content over the course of the year that when we came then to look for awards that we could enter that into, it was basically all there, and all we needed to do was gather some evidence and some more information to supplement that work, to the testimony and all the other information we'd already gathered. And there we had an award entry, which actually then got us shortlisted for some national awards. So again, what was the common denominator in all of that? The content. So I'm now going to talk about something which I think is really undervalued and really important, and that's about communication with your colleagues. And I've already said this, but this is hugely important, and it's hugely important at the moment as well, given the challenges we've got. But here's a point which which organizations often underestimate, and it's that if you focus solely on your customers, you'll forget that their experience, whoever your customers are, is to a large degree a projection of how engaged and motivated your staff are. So if you're not doing that bit to inform, engage, inspire your own colleagues about what your organization does, your mission, rather than assuming that they just get it, then actually your customers are the ones, whoever they are, who are going to suffer at the end of that. So internal communication should be seen as just as important as other disciplines. So some lessons from us around this is that around late 2018, we had underinvested in our communications function significantly. I was actually brought in to sort things out really, and give us a function that was representative of the size of organisation that we are. So we had unloved platforms from an internal point of view. So we did have an intranet platform, but it wasn't really used. We weren't really telling any stories about the work that we were doing. We had all that transformation going on and really coming to a head, but no real narrative or way in which colleagues could understand that. So staff were overwhelmed by lots of competing messages. There wasn't really a clear understanding of the journey, how that was progressing, how major projects that we were doing were progressing. It wasn't clear where to access information. The comms team, because we were, the team was too small. It didn't have the right balance of people in it. We weren't seen as a team to go to, and that's then a problem because you're not getting the materials, the raw materials you need to be able to tell these stories. And so really, there was a really big risk here. And again, this is why I say this isn't something that's nice to have. It's integral. Is that we had all these transformation plans, but this is a really kind of awful American phrase, I'm sure, but it's actually a really good one, which is culture eats strategy for breakfast. And that's the problem. You can have this amazing strategy, you can have all the best transformation plans in the world, but if you're not able to engage your colleagues around it, actually you could derail those plans, because you'll end up with people who are not informed, who can't see the bigger picture, who feel demotivated by that, and don't become engaged in those important projects that you're trying to push forward. So that was kind of where we were in late 2018, and that's the journey we've been on to try and flick that around really. And why is it that internal comms isn't particularly well done? Well, I think as I've said, it's kind of seen as secondary to the main work. I think of no, we need to engage stakeholders, we need to engage customers. Of course you do. That's hugely important, and that is it's incredibly important that's done professionally, and that a lot of energy and resource is plowed into that. But so too should it be for your colleagues. It shouldn't be at the expense of your colleagues. And of course, I've said here there's a focus on PR and media because this is sexier. It's true, I've worked in organisations where it feels like the sole goal of the exec team is to get into inside housing. Well, yeah, being in inside housing is a great thing to engage the sector, but actually there are probably some much more worthwhile things that you could be spending your energy on in terms of engaging your colleagues and your customers and just really the communities that you're in, rather than people in your sector. There is benefit to that, but there's also great benefit to doing other things. So we just need to remember that. And again, I think it's this point that I've come across in organisations where there's a separation between internal communication and external communication in a way that's just not healthy or helpful. And why it matters is, well, your workforce is the most important thing to engage, most important audience to engage, especially at the moment. We're lucky to work in sectors, many of us, where our teams deliver important things for people. In housing, it's one of the most important things that people will ever have. And yet we miss the opportunity to tell the importance of this story and get that across and engage our colleagues around that. And I guess a question I would ask to you is, honestly, how many of your staff as a cross-section across your business could articulate what you do, and what your mission is, your business strategy is? I think that we honestly challenge ourselves. The answer is that quite a few couldn't, actually, and it's our job to do that. It's your communications team's jobs, facilitating your other colleagues and your senior colleagues to do that. So we have a duty to engage our teams. That's how we help them buy into our mission. It's how we help them see the role that they play. And ultimately, here's the really important thing, it's how we drive productivity, motivation, and ultimately provide great services. So that's the connection to KPIs and the work that we do in terms of actually outputs. It's not about just telling people nice stories for the sake of it. Helping our people to understand the bigger picture is crucial. Some myths about internal communication, which I'll talk about now. So that it needs to be dull and functional. I've come across internal comms colleagues in other businesses where it's like, well, hang on, this isn't about payroll or something that colleagues have to do. So why am I going to tell a story about a piece of work that we've done out in our communities? Of course, that is what we do. And of course, it's just as important that we engage and inspire colleagues around that rather than just tell them about things they need to do. That it should be about your organization and activity rather than people. Well, of course, all good communication centers around individuals and people. Please tell the stories of the work that your colleagues are doing, rather than just stuff about projects. Again, this belief it's unconnected to external PR. It isn't. Everything that you use on your website or as a press release or a comment piece should in some version be used internally. You might have to tweak it and approach it in a different way, but you should be doing that. And really the best internal communications work, the really good work that's done here, helps your staff to feel a sense of belonging, to feel a sense of being valued by your organization and a sense of purpose. And striking that balance is really, really important to have colleagues that come to work every day feeling that what they're going to do matters and knowing that whatever function they work in your organization, they're contributing towards that. Really important, powerful thing that people look for in work. So some practical examples of how this works. And what you're seeing in front of your screen now is what our intranet looked like in late 2018. And what you're seeing here is quite a bland, corporate, colorless kind of platform, really. The updates were sporadic. The people, as you can see on the right-hand side, are very much stock images. They're not people from inside our organizations. And again, it strikes home to the point of why pictures are so important. But there was really no impetus for colleagues to visit this intranet unless they wanted something like to book holiday or to get a document that they needed. It didn't provide any clarity on the vision and the journey that our organization was going on, which at that time was an incredibly important journey. So what we started to do was to significantly up the quality and the regularity of updates. And this is a really important thing, is you have to have the manpower, you have to have the people to be able to gather this content. And then we're not talking about teams of 10 people, we're talking about 1 or 2 colleagues who are dedicated to pulling together these stories and doing other work as well, but making sure you've got that content that you can use. We put in place a new easy to understand structure on the intranet, and we introduced a new weekly newsletter, really simple email built in what at that time was a free platform, which was sent to all colleagues and signposted them back to those stories. So it wasn't a massive PDF that people had to read to. We used the intranet as the basis of where those stories were. So that was your, if you like, your BBC News website, and the bulletin merely linked people back to those stories because lots of them had missed them during the week. So we were driving people back to that platform. We also rolled out an app, and this is a really important point. If you've got staff, as I'm sure some people on the call have, like us, who are based out of the office most of the time, and their working practices are different to perhaps yours and I might be. So this was a way to get people engaged with the One Place app, and it appears identically now on a smartphone as it does to people who have it up on a desktop or laptop screen. And then we started to introduce some new easy publications that people could engage with. So here is a flipbook. Again, flipbook software is literally the most uncomplicated thing you can imagine. This costs us about £700 for a yearly subscription, and that gives us the ability to add up to 100 documents of our choosing. You can really easily customize the background, and the experience of a flipbook is so much more engaging than just a bland PDF that you're scrolling through. You can also embed video into this, which is a really good thing as well. Again, a really easy process that's not resource intensive. But the basis of this publication was to start to tell people that story of the evolving transformation, to go in depth, talk to some of the directors, show how people were being involved in some of these big projects. And suddenly this was starting to come to life for people, and they could see why they were being asked to take an hour out of their day to attend a workshop or training session. It was because actually it was part of a much bigger mission to improve our customer service, as an example. We also then revamped our intranet, so straight away a much more colourful, engaging intranet, with using banners and different things to hook people in, telling people stories. I mean, this story on the top here, top right, was a story that we ran during Inclusion Week. We put out an appeal to colleagues to tell stories about something in their life that was different. And this is our Director of Care and Support, Martin Hale, actually talking about his growing up with a mum who had a very severe disability. Really good engagement on these stories. And you could say, well, hang on, what value is there in that? Well, there's immense value in it, because what we're saying is we're an inclusive organisation. We're showing that our leadership team are people with real challenges. And that story had an immense amount of value. That is about our work, that is about our people, and it's important we tell stories about that just as much as it is telling people they need to use a new letter template or whatever else we need to tell people. So this led the way for us, really. And again, we revamped Weekly News so that, again, the brand is really fresh, it's professional, and that's a really important thing. Don't think that you have to send really professional looking marketing out to people who might buy one of your properties, as an example, but that your intranet and your emails to colleagues can look kind of second rate and can just be an Outlook email. Actually try to treat them with the same respect as an audience as you do all of your audiences. It's really important that they engage. And we looked at some bespoke pages on our intranet to tell stories about projects as well. We had we launched things like our guide to Citizen when we became Citizen, which was a kind of way of very simply telling staff how to use. That's a really well-read document, again on flipbook software. And this is really important. We introduced some interactive features that staff could get involved in. So on our intranet platform, we have a You Smashed It feature, which is a really great feature that allows any member of our staff to nominate another colleague for doing something that was beyond their role, or just a great gesture. And some of the things we get through there now are fantastic. We get roughly now about 30 or 40 nominations per month. So an incredible thing, and a great thing for colleagues to just take a look at and see, oh, you know, here we have a mobile cleaner, look at something that he's done, and instantly they get a sense of the challenges that staff face in the work that they're doing and how they fit into that. We actually harness that feature and we turn that into basically an Employee of the Month competition, which is now entirely voted for and nominated by colleagues. So we take all of the nominations we get through You Smashed It, we shortlist those to 5, and then all colleagues vote on their winner. That person then is rewarded with a prize, a certificate, a letter from our chief exec, and of course, knowing that they are the Citizen of the Month and all of the profile that comes along with that. That's one of the best things that we've done in terms of being able to then get stories as well that we can showcase. And when we do our annual awards, we're now going to have a Citizen of the Year competition, which is all of the monthly winners, and then one big vote for our overall winner. So things like that, and particularly at the moment, being able to tell some of these stories, so important to keep that motivation, engagement going. So and again, just making use of things that we do. So I know most organisations have an awards set up, but it's only present when the awards are being entered or when the ceremony happens. The rest of the year, it's not. So we've opened a page on our intranet. This is probably my favourite page. You look at this and you kind of think, wow, at a glance, you can kind of see and get a sense of just how important our Excellence Awards are. And it just keeps the momentum going during the year. So this is sat there as a library to anyone who wants to have a look, new colleagues, or anyone who just chances upon it, of a catalogue of what happened at our Excellence Awards ceremony back in 2020. So you can see all the winners, you can find out about the work they did, you can watch a video from the ceremony. And this is a great tool for us. When we then launch the awards, this becomes the page through which people can enter. So thinking about things cleverly, again, our conference, which happened in March, thankfully we just got it in before lockdown came in. This, first of all, was a page where a functional page where people could find out information about the conference in the lead up to it, and we could share crucial information about it. Then it's become basically a library of what happened on the day. Why waste that content? So all of the videos we used at the conference, all of the content, anyone can go back and rewatch. So I guess we did all of this. Well, what happened next? We did see an immediate increase in engagement with our intranet. We saw a massive increase in engagement from harder to reach teams from the app, people who haven't previously engaged in our work, suddenly doing so. And to be honest, a value that goes way beyond just engagement with our intranet and internal comms. You've got more people wanting their stories told, and a culture of that sharing of what is going on in the organization. More content for external comms. So lots of the stuff that we end up using as award entries and press releases and social media comes from people who want to share something with colleagues first. A really healthy competition from teams in the organization, seeing others' work profiled and wanting theirs to be profiled. New networks for us as a comms team. A feel-good factor, and that is so crucially important, particularly at the moment, with lockdown and the challenges that COVID have brought in, unprecedented challenges. And overall, a better understanding of our organizational journey. Where are we heading? What individuals' parts in that are? And the numbers are backed up too. So this was our monthly intranet visits in November 2018 versus when we checked in March 2020, and that has continued to climb. So you can see a doubling of people now engaging with the stories and the work that we're doing, which is fantastic. And similarly, when we launched weekly news, which replaced nothing at the time, it was a new thing, we had 30% open rates. We're now up to 70% as of March this year. And again, that's remained steady throughout lockdown. So we did a staff conference, as I mentioned, and then of course our friend COVID came along, and I think it would be impossible not to mention today COVID. I'm going to rattle through this last part of the presentation because I do want to leave time for questions. And this is how we've approached coronavirus, again using our intranet as a hub really to provide initially people with information, and we're kind of back in that phase now, aren't we, where people are a bit confused again about potentially what the restrictions are and what that means for them from a work perspective. So we've had a coronavirus hub on our intranet this whole time. We've also sent regular updates from our chief executive, again, sharp, slick, updated with clickable links through to the guidance, pictures of our chief exec in them. So whenever this lands in someone's inbox, they know they have to read it, and they do read it. The figures back that up. We have a system which gives us the engagement rates with them. And that's really important, is to be able to measure how people are engaging. And then we've also done lots of video Q&As, which frankly is something we hadn't thought to do before lockdown came in. And I think this is where there are, though none of us would have wanted the pandemic, there are some lessons we can learn and some positive legacies that we can take back. And we'll be doing these Q&As. They've been one of the best things that we've done in terms of engaging staff in a way that goes beyond just reading something. And we've also tried to introduce some fun elements and replace those, people call it the water cooler conversation, don't they? But the bits of engagement that you miss by not being around colleagues. And this is a page we launched called Our Place, which is simply a forum where people can share their own thoughts, pictures, whatever it is they want to share that's kind of not work related. We've also done some posted things. So we did back in June, we recognized people had been working for months and months at home. They were still making a great contribution. And this was something we called a hug in a box, a personalized package that was delivered to every member of staff. That isn't a member of staff on the left there, it's their pets, but lots of people, maybe it could be our mascot actually, but lots of people did take pictures with their pets. And this just contained a really nice message from our chief exec to say thank you for everything you're doing, and also just some nice bits that people could use. So some tea, biscuits, chocolates, healthy snack bars, a bit of a care package really, and that had an amazing response. So these little gestures can make a very real difference. And we've also done things like we've held wellbeing sessions. We now have a wellbeing Wednesday, which is every other Wednesday, where we do yoga, mindfulness, all sorts of things, really, really positive. And it's certainly going to be an ongoing challenge for everybody on this call, for all of your organizations, is to keep informing, engaging and inspiring staff as large numbers continue to work from home and will be for the foreseeable. Internal communication is absolutely fundamental to this. We followed a similar thing when we launched our business strategy on the 1st of September. We did a package out with a QR code that linked to an animation to various other things about that strategy and the document itself. We've tried to create a really easy to understand narrative around that to help people. And again, using the intranet for pages where people can check in on projects and keep abreast of that transformation, though they're not in the buildings and in our office. So we've come to the end now. We can move on to some questions, and I hope we have some. The lessons from me: make it easy, make it interactive, make it relevant and informative, make it dynamic. Lead the way if you're a comms team, or have your comms team do the same, but content really is everything. And this matters. This isn't about telling stories. It's not about fluffy stuff. This is about how you drive forward your strategic objectives. Whoever your audiences are, communicating with them well is hugely important. If we don't communicate with our staff effectively, please, if nothing else, take this home. You're going to face a lack of engagement and motivation. You're going to have people who don't have a sense of the bigger picture, vision and purpose of your organization. Ultimately, you'll have a lack of productivity and your projects and change will be derailed. That's the negative way of looking at it, but it's important. We do know just how important that this is. This is central to the success of your organization. So please do invest in good communication, focus on those people stories, engage your staff. Please do that, and make sure you have communications experts that can help you with this. And that's my presentation. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now, and hopefully we can move on to your questions.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Steve. Wonderful case study. I'm sure there must be awards somewhere where you could put that forward as a best practice case study. So thank you for that. Again, a reminder, ladies and gentlemen, if you have any questions for Steve, if you could pop them in the Q&A box down at the bottom of your screen rather than the chat box. There is a question in the chat box, which I'll come to in a moment. Before we do that, just a few shout outs. I learned this from one of these webinars that I was a guest on in the United States a few weeks ago, where the host was very keen to give shout outs to those that had mentioned their names in the chat box. So I'm going to follow suit. So Carl Singh from sunny Cardiff, Charlie Jones from Bouygues in the southwest, Marcia Johnson from Gleeds in Cardiff, Wayne Rundle, Acorn Blue Cornwall, hello to you. Derek Bryden from, Newcastle, Summers Inman, Pam Bandel, Royal County of Berkshire. Had to emphasise the Royal County there. Nick Jones in sunny Wrexham, Tim Craig from Newcastle, Jessica Newton also from Newcastle, Emma Tate, she's down in the shared apprenticeships Southwest. Tim Willis is our single viewer from the West Midlands today. Donna from the Nash Partnership in Bristol. Kevin Harris here from sunny Stroud, and Philippa Jones from Womble Bond Dickinson in Newcastle. So there we are. There's the shout outs. There is one question that I've had, and that is to say, will the presentation be made available? Yes, indeed it will. It's going to be available on the Leaders Meets website, but also on the Constructing Excellence websites. And one other name I must mention, Katrina Lingwood, my colleague from CE in the Northeast, apparently inadvertently, when I was doing the introductions, I said the Northwest. Sorry about that, Katrina. I couldn't be more apologetic. Now then, let's have a look at the questions that have come back. Nicholas Jones has got a question for you, Steve. How do you measure open rates on your intranet bulletins?
Yeah, it's a really good question, that, and it's a really important thing. I think, just generally the ability to be able to measure how your messages are landing with any audience is incredibly important, and it's underestimated quite a lot by organizations as well. It's done very well in marketing, of course, because we're trying to sell something, but for colleagues, being able to know how many of them have engaged with something is hugely important. So this is why you need a platform. The way to do that effectively is to have a platform. So that first weekly newsletter that you saw, the kind of bluey green WM branded one, was done in a system called MailChimp, which is actually free. So there's no cost associated with that. But what it will allow you to do once you've sent, each email that you send is essentially its own campaign. And you can click into that live at any time, and it will tell you the percentage of people who've opened that email. And it will also tell you how many of them clicked and what they have clicked on, which is, again, is hugely important to know. What are the types of stories that colleagues are clicking on? What are they interested in? What are they not interested in? We as a comms team are constantly referencing back to that and saying, okay, that didn't land, so we need to do something slightly different. Or this is an area we know colleagues are particularly interested in. And there are some surprises in that sense sometimes as well. So that helps to guide our work. So a really important thing, and the way to do it simply, is you have to invest in a platform rather than just send emails out via Outlook or the way that this has sort of traditionally been done, really.
Okay, thank you for that, Steve. Hopefully that answers your question, Nicholas. Did I say Nicola earlier? I do apologise if I did. It's my I haven't got my spectacles on. Now then, I've got a comment here from Philippa Jones that maybe you would like to speak to, Steve. Great presentation, first of all, says Philippa. Video blogs are a great way to get insight into someone's personality. And one of my favourite changes made in lockdown, which uses the technology available. What have you got to say about video blogs?
I think it's a really good point. So, and again, here's a thing that I was talking to our exec team the other day, and I was kind of reflecting on how, why didn't we think of doing this before? And I think it was as simple as, we hadn't rolled Microsoft Teams out in our organization, or whatever version of that. I know lots of organizations are now using Teams or whatever version of video software that you're using. I totally agree. Anything you can do with video is just a different way for people to engage. So we try to do stories where there's an element which is, it's a written story, but then it's also a video. So if we use the example of those Q&As, we do those via Microsoft Teams, really easy to do via the live event function on Microsoft Teams. So you can then send an invite out to everyone in your organization to join. We did one with our chief exec, which was about an hour long, similar to this. Really amazing engagement. People can ask questions anonymously, which you have to be brave about, but you can moderate them. But most colleagues play the game as it should be played in that sense. And then what we can do, of course, is record those meetings. So anyone who can't join live, we then just have a story on our intranet, which is a YouTube video, an unlisted YouTube video that anyone can watch afterwards. But yeah, I mean, softwares like Microsoft Teams just open so much up to you, because actually there's nothing stopping. We've done things like we've said we'd love to do a kind of week in the life feature with you. Would you mind setting up just doing a meeting with yourself on Teams, recording it? We'll send you some questions, ask them, and we'll edit it together. Suddenly you've got a 2-minute video of someone who's out in our communities at the moment facing challenges around social distancing and whatever, and that story comes to life in a way that it just really wouldn't if it was just written down. So yes, using video, which is easier really than ever at the moment, is a really, really effective tool.
Okay. Don't forget, ladies and gentlemen, we still have got maybe about 10 minutes left if anyone's got any more questions. While I'm waiting for them to be written, on my Facebook memory that came up this morning as soon as I woke up, 7 years ago, it said, my son had been involved in organising some podcasts for children in need, because at the time he was working at Radio 2 and he'd arranged for all the presenters, Chris Evans, Steve Wright and so on, to interview the person that they were most inspired by. And I think the memory that came up was him going to Jules Holland's house to record an interview between Chris Evans and Sir Paul McCartney. That's what came up on my Facebook. But then I recall that since then, my son has really gone down the line of podcasting. He's got his own podcast company now. And I'm starting to use podcasts quite a lot within CE. Just sort of wanted to get your views on that. And then there's a secondary question. What I'm trying to do with the podcast I'm doing with CE Southwest is actually unpick the people within construction, because we're very good as an industry at talking about projects and processes and procedures, but we're not very good at talking about people. and I'm trying to get under the skin of some of the personalities that have come to the fore, particularly during lockdown, the likes of Graham Watts at CIC, Susanna Nicol at Build UK, and so on. You know, almost the stars of the industry. So, two-edged question while I wait for others to ask theirs. What do you think about podcasting, and what do you think in terms of communication about trying to make the industry more about the people?
Yeah, I think, I think on the podcasting point of view, again, it's just another means, which has been there for, as you said, it's been there for a long while. And you kind of think, well, for us, we were guilty of it. Why don't we use things that are there that just engage people in a slightly different way, rather than when we had to get messages to people before. Let's think about if we had to get a message out to staff, we were thinking, well, we'll have to email everyone. And then if we want to present something, we'd have to just do a series of kind of voluntary workshops in our biggest room at our head office. And the result was you didn't reach anywhere near as many people as you now can by using technology, using things like those live Q&As. Yeah, podcasts, why not? And don't feel the need for them to be, they don't all, if you've got a great subject that can last you half an hour, brilliant. If actually it's 10 minutes focused on something or getting to know someone, even better. I think anything that we can use, especially with, again, lots of people working from home, well, a podcast is a great thing that you could just kind of put on in the background while you're working, rather than have to sit there, read and take the time to read a lengthy publication or whatever. So all for that. And I think, the people thing is essentially the crucial ingredient to any good communication. And I think it is overlooked. And I think you're absolutely right in housing and construction in particular. There is a kind of, there is a sort of obsession with the product of the home and this sense of losing the sense that actually that's a building that someone ends up living in. And that's just one example of how actually it's always better to tell these stories through people, because people like, especially when we're not able to talk to as many people as we normally would face to face or meet people. People want to get to know other people and find out about them and as well as what they do and the projects that they're working on. So for me, that's everything, and I use the example of that press release. Too often the focus isn't on the people that are moving into a house or whatever the version of the people story within a story is, and it's focused on the product instead. And actually, you're going to get people much more engaged if they can relate to something. And the way they relate to something is by that story being told through a person.
Steve, thank you for that answer. I'm looking at my Q&A box. There's nothing in it. And I'm looking at my chat box and there's nothing more in that. So I think what I'm going to do with respect is say thank you. A very, very interesting hour, or just shy of an hour. I'm sure food for thought for our listeners. So thank you for your time and thank you for your experience, most valuable. Can I thank, as always, Howard and the team at Leaders Meets for hosting these regular webinars. And just to say, ladies and gentlemen, that next week we're going to be looking at that very important topic of productivity, efficiency, in essence, to achieve more with less with Steve Clark. So hopefully, ladies and gentlemen, you'll join us again next Friday at midday. But for now, I wish you a very pleasant afternoon and weekend. Thank you very much and goodbye.
Hi, Steve. Thanks very much. Highly informative. There was one, so I've allowed him to talk. What I'll try and do is bring his camera in as well. So just give us a minute. Yeah, I've promoted him to a panelist now. So you should be able to come in and speak, Jonathan, okay? You there, Jonathan?
Yes, I am. Yep.
Okay, there you go. We managed to capture your question in the end, so you can put it directly on screen.
I was trying to phrase it appropriately. It took longer than I thought. Communication is never that simple, is it?
No.
Do you want me to read?
Yeah. I'm just reading. I've got the question in front of me. So really, I think what you're asking is, to best practice around actual sort of delivery of a presentation or webinar, sort of. Yeah. I mean, I think I suppose that there's quite a lot of stuff, particularly at the moment, because more and more people are having to do this, obviously, on kind of live events and it's a different. The thing to bear in mind, I think, is doing it this way is different. It's different in a number of important ways, which is that there's a lot of intangible benefits you get from being in a room with people. And reading that sort of body language and kind of being able to engage more. But you can do it just as effectively. So the first thing I would say is have a trawl around the internet, for the top 10 tips you'll find loads of articles.
Yeah,
top things to have you. Yeah, okay. And then also some YouTube videos as well. So the best way to learn about these things really is just to watch some good ones, and then you get a sense of how they're done. I mean, I always think that I'm with you as well. I've seen some good ones, and I've seen some where a few minutes in you're kind of falling asleep a little bit, and you disengage from it. So, and I think some of that is about thinking about the fundamentals, which a lot of people don't really think about. Where is what's your audience and what are they looking for out of this, and how can you make it kind of beneficial enough that you've got specific advice that people can take away and hopefully use, but also general enough that you're not going to have someone on the call going, well, that's not relevant to me at all. So I don't really know why I'm here or why I'm listening.
You don't want to be drilling down too deep into the detail.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the bit that people miss a lot of the time, is they go straight in for here's the presentation that I want to deliver, rather than here are the questions that people are likely to have, or things they might be thinking about. So some of it's the content, and then of course the actual delivery of it is, if you're doing a presentation, I mean, I always try and keep mine so image heavy, which isn't always easy, because if you don't have the bank of images, then you can't really do that. But
well, obviously you've invested in your photography, haven't you?
We have. But if I'd been doing this presentation 2 years ago, I'd have been scrabbling around and probably, nicking images off the internet, to be honest, and using graphics. And actually, it's a fundamental thing of presentations that I think people get wrong a lot, is that they just put so much text on there, and no one's reading that. You want them to be listening to you, and for the thing that's on the screen to be just like thought-provoking. Exactly right. So it's things like that, really. But I mean, I'm no expert on this, so I would recommend doing a bit of reading. And as I say, YouTube probably a really useful resource for this kind of thing.
Yeah. Okay. What I found interesting with your presentation was actually you've obviously made a deliberate choice to actually have the 2 screens.
Yeah.
Actually, and not many people do that.
Oh, okay.
And I think that's quite a successful thing. But obviously, you have to choose the images and the text size on your shared screen to be able to work on a relatively small device.
Yeah, that's true. And exactly. But I guess, and again, this is where it comes back to, you imagine if you were in a room with someone doing a traditional presentation, and all you could see, they were in a cupboard and all you could see was the slides, it wouldn't be as engaging, would it? So I think even if it's just someone's face and seeing them talking, that does add quite a lot to it, really.
And make sure there's a degree of animation in your presentation.
Yeah, I guess so.
And be excited about your content as well.
Yeah. It's, but I learn, like you. I think it's do something. You can't. You've got to do that bit that's the thinking about who's watching this, what are they going to want from it, what are the likely things I can engage with. There'll be some of the bits of today that for some people were not as relevant as others, but hopefully there was at least 1 or 2 things there that kind of get people thinking. And if you can do that, you're not going to go too far wrong.
Yeah, but I think what you said, would it be relevant to any organisation?
You would hope so. Yeah, and that's why I kind of thought I focused on, because some of the, there are some unique things about external communication that, frankly, any organisation, is why I put a fair bit of focus on staff, particularly given the current sort of environment, is that, every organisation should be doing that well. Whether you've got 3 employees or whether you've got 3,000 employees, you're not doing internal communication well now, you're going to struggle, struggle.
Yeah, we're only 17 people, but we've had a huge amount of investment in terms of that.
Well, that's good.
To keep
That's really good to hear.
engaged and energized. And because the whole culture of an organization has changed, doesn't it? Like, you know, we were a business that actually wanted to be in one room, and we've designed our business around being no bigger than one room.
Yeah.
Because actually we thought that camaraderie and collegiate approach was really important.
Yeah.
But all of a sudden that's all gone. So how do we recast that culture in a socially distanced way? Really difficult.
It is really difficult, and God, that's the big question, isn't it? That's a massive thing for us. I mean, we've had about half of our business are office based, and the other half are kind of repairs guys, people out in the communities all the time. So that was already a challenge as it was, but now add into that the fact that, you know, obviously for now the best part of the year our offices have been empty, largely empty anyway. And you know, we're never going to go back to, why would we possibly, with all the benefits that there have been, I think for all big organizations to an extent, you know, in terms of people not having to travel, or the stress of commutes being taken away from things, all the other intangible benefits that come with working from home, you know, but it's finding a balance, because it's not all good. You know, there are some things that aren't so good. So
people's isolation is probably the biggest thing, isn't it?
I think it is, and I think, you know, some of my team members have really struggled with that, and it comes down to your personality, some of it as well, and your resilience and how well you cope with
your home situation.
Yeah, absolutely. Even things like the actual layout of your home. You know, do you have a room? I'm lucky. I had a spare bedroom that I could turn into an office, but not everybody has that.
No. People, graduates having to work initially working off an ironing board.
Yeah,
they didn't have anything else.
Yeah.
You know, I mean,
so that's the big question, bedroom, isn't it?
And how do you create that culture? So I think it is really important, that internal communication stuff.
Yeah.
We've tried hard, and it's quite interesting how just through kind of not actually particularly project related stuff, but actually through almost personal interest stories around the staff and stuff we've been doing and whatever else, and other, you know, exercise initiatives and whatever else. You know, we've grown our little Instagram account from next to nothing to, I don't know, over 2,000 you know followers, which for a little business is, you know,
that's really good. Well, we've got about 160, Jonathan, so you're doing really well there. Yeah, no, I think you're right, and I think that you know, that sense of like, because there's lots of stuff that as an employer we can't actually, you know, we did a survey recently, we got the results, which was kind of an attempt to try and assess how people think we're coping with COVID from an employer point of view, and then a couple of questions that were more about how are you coping. And what we could see was that actually, in terms of how people think we're keeping them informed and engaged and supporting them, we're scoring quite well. Actually, in terms of their own well-being and the impact on that since lockdown, it's really quite low. So what that tells you is there is only so much you can do as an employer, but you've got to try and find all those little, you've got to try and do as much as you can, you know, and those things like the well-being sessions, they cost about 50 quid, because all you're doing is paying a personal trainer for their time. You know, that's money for them and supporting them when they're probably not able to do any work at the moment. And actually we get in sort of 50, 60 people joining that, and it's an hour that they're not working, that they can focus on something, they can do a bit of physical exercise. That's massive, really.
It's just that mindfulness stuff, isn't it? It helps.
And we've done some of that stuff as well, and we've had people in from, like, and again, just a conversation with someone from Birmingham Mind, and they came and
we had a Mind. Yeah, it's good.
And, you know, really important.
There are lots of programs out there that are available to people.